Guys, hope you are enjoying your time at home and starting to get into the hang of logging into your classes. And I hope that this is a relaxing time for you to just sit back and enjoy the next few pages of Hero. My goal is to get to page 55 today, but we'll see how we do. And then there will be a quick response in your Canvas page. Today, I want you to think about kind of what makes Sean different. What are some of his strengths? We've learned a lot about his weaknesses. We know he has a really bad temper. We know he has a lot of anger issues after being abused, but we start to see a different side of Sean today. At this point, he's been picked up by the cops and he has earned himself a number of hours of community service. And he has started working for Mr. Hassler at a ranch. He kind of thinks that this is dumb, but he just wants to get his hours in so that he can move on with his life. And I'll kind of pick it up from that point. I hope you enjoy the next few pages of Hero. By the time he came to get me for my break, I was done with the cow barn. I could tell he was actually impressed with what I had accomplished, especially since he tried so hard to find something wrong. I swear, we spent half an hour looking at the work I had done, but he couldn't find any fault with it. I mean, it's really not hard to tell if it's been cleaned out or not. But he sure spent a lot of time looking for something to criticize. We started walking to the horse barn. About halfway there, he gave me a sheepish grin. Hey, if you keep this pace up, I won't have enough work to keep you busy for your 80 hours of community service. They'll have to send you someplace else to finish up. I was considering what this information might mean to me when a guy in faded blue jeans, a beat-up red flannel shirt, and dusty cowboy boots came sprinting out of the main barn. "Boss!" he shouted. "Manda just went into labor." Mr. Hassler stopped in his tracks. "Are you sure?" he bellowed. He looked really upset. The cowboy nodded his head frantically. "Go call Doc Wharton. Tell him we got an early delivery for him. Come on, boy, we got an emergency situation for you to help with." He started off at a pretty brisk pace for the barn. What? Kate finally came up with an award-winning comment for the situation. Mr. Hassler didn't stop, slow down, or even respond. He was headed for the barn, and nothing was going to stop him. I jogged after him in the musty air. What kind of emergency are you talking about?" I asked after I had caught up and kind of caught my breath back. "It's a delivery, boy." "Yeah, what's so important about a delivery?" I assumed he was talking about the delivery James had gone into town for. Is the hay gonna rot or something?" Mr. Hassler snorted. "Boy, are you really that stupid? Didn't you hear James?" I tried to recall exactly what James had said, but I really couldn't remember. Apparently, I took too long trying to find an answer because Mr. Hassler graciously filled me in. "The delivery," he snapped off each word like a firecracker, "is coming in the form of a mare or a foal that's nearly 2 weeks premature." "What?" "Oh, for Pete's sake, city boy, a horse is having her baby too early." I stopped in my tracks. "Nope. No, you don't. You cannot even expect me to help a horse have a baby, not after shoveling poop all day. I'm not going to do it." I had turned around and taken 3 steps back towards the house when an iron-hot pain shot down my arm. I looked down and saw an ancient hand gripping my shoulder so tightly I would have bruises the next day. From the hand, I looked up, following a wiry arm until I saw his red face with those intense eyes bulging out at me. If I had the time, I would tan your hide for your selfish attitude. But I don't have the time. I have 2 lives that are depending on you and me and getting over there to help them survive. I cannot do this by myself. I need you, Sean. She needs you. The little guy waiting to be born needs you. How dare you disrespect that life? Halfway through this fun speech, he began dragging me down the filthy stall on the right, and then he shoved me in it. The horse, he had called her a mare, was on her side. She was reddish-brown with a thick mane and a tail. When she rolled her eyes at us, I could see the whites in her eyes. She kicked her legs, trying to get up, and I saw a flash of her steel horseshoes. Mr. Hassler shoved past me and fell. At least I thought he fell. Then I figured out that he had thrown himself onto her to hold her head down so she would quit thrashing so much. "Shh, Amanda, shh. It's okay, honey," he murmured to her. I stood there like a bump on a log, not really knowing what to do. He talked to her for a few more minutes before he remembered that I was even there. "Come here, boy." He approached slowly. Her legs had stopped kicking, but her sides were still heaving. I couldn't quite tell which was louder, her panting or the pounding of my heart. "Come down here and hold her head. I've got to help at the other end." I almost objected to holding her head down until I realized what was probably going to be involved at the other end. I dropped to my knees in her head and placed her hands as close to his as I could. "Hold her at the muzzle and at the back of her head. It'll probably take all of your weight since you're so small." Since I knew where the back of her head was, I guessed that the muzzle must be her nose. I was too overwhelmed to complain about being called small, even though it was one of my biggest pet peeves. "Boss?" We both looked up to see the cowboy James in the stall doorway. "Doc can't make it tonight. He's all the way across town, and they've got 2 other deliveries tonight. One was scheduled, and the other one's a preemie, like ours. So his assistant is out there too." Mr. Hassler swore. Then he gave James a list of things to go get. "Sorry, boy. Looks like you're in this till the end. It'll take all 3 of us to help her out." I couldn't even answer because I was concentrating too much on holding her head. Sometimes she'd be fighting and it took all my weight, and other times she'd relax. And I would try and relax too, to make it a little bit more comfortable for her. The next 3 hours were unbelievably long. I tried hard not to let what was going on at the other end involve me, but it was impossible. It turned out that because the baby horse, which they were calling a foal, was early, it hadn't turned around the right way. So not only were we worried about the mare hurting herself or one of us, we were also worried about the baby foal strangling on the umbilical cord before it even had a chance to take its first breath. I did not mind watching too much at first. Then it got kind of bloody and gross. Even then, though, I could not stop looking. It was amazing seeing this foal's early entry into the world. Suddenly, Mr. Hassler and James both leaned back with a slippery, bloody miniature horse on their laps. Amanda's breathing started to slow. So did mine. The foal was exhausted. We all were. Amanda relaxed her head in my lap. It was heavy. We all sat there, no one moving, for several minutes. It felt really good. Then Amanda lifted her head and began to get up. James stood up quickly and spread his arms, keeping her from dropping her head to the foal. Mr. Hassler gathered the foal in his arms and began to carry it from the stall. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked. "Doesn't he need his mom?" Neither man answered me. They were both concentrating on the mare and her foal. Mr. Hassler was only 2 feet away from the door when the mare lunged. He turned instinctively, and she missed the foal, but ripped Mr. Hassler's shirt instead. He stepped out the door, and James shut the door, dragging me out just as Amanda lunged again. "Sorry, boss, he's got you," James said. and I saw the fresh blood spreading down his shirt. Mr. Hassler didn't even glance at his shirt. He just started down the row of stalls, entering a small one clear at the other end of the barn. It had a thick layer of straw already laid down, and there was an overturned bucket and a stack of clean cloths in the corner. Mr. Hassler set the foal gently down in the straw, and then he turned to us. Boy, I want you to start helping this little guy out. Use those cloths, clean him off really well, get him clean, but be gentle. Don't hurt him. James and me'll go settle Mama and clean up her stall. And clean up ourselves, James added. Mr. Hassler nodded, but he really did not stop talking. Then we'll be back to help you feed. He turned his head on me and left with James. I was confused. I was kind of angry at the way he was treating me. I was angry at the way he was treating the foal. I was tempted to just turn and leave. Who cared if I left? So I'd get more community service hours thrown at me. Who cared? But then I heard a noise in the straw. I turned and I saw the foal trying to stand. He got up twice, but his wobbly legs would not hold him, and he fell back down. After the second try, he quit and just lay there looking at me with these impossibly big eyes. He was shaking and covered with disgusting, bloody slime. I did not want to be in the same stall with him, yet alone touch him, but he was begging me with those eyes. He was pleading for help, and I knew how much it hurt to ask for help and be denied. Oh, I said, somebody's got to help you out, and it ain't going to be Mr. H or James. It's not going to be your mama. I guess it's got to be me. I picked up a cloth and began wiping him off. I talked to him the whole time, too. He was really interested. He never took his eyes off me. By the time Mr. H returned, I had wiped the foal down, not once but twice. He was the softest thing I have ever held. After I wiped him down the first time, I sat down and held him in my lap. His brown eyes seemed to take up half his face. His coat was the color of a really new penny. He started sucking on my fingers when I tried to wipe his face off the second time. It felt really funny. Well, boys, look like we need to feed you. And then we need to name you. You're going to need a really good name. And a really big meal, I added with a laugh as he increased the intensity of the suction on my fingers. Suddenly there was a bottle floating just above my head. Here, I'd bet he'd like this better than your fingers. It took me a minute to get my fingers out of his mouth, but once I replaced them with the bottle, he was definitely excited. He started bobbing his head up and down and thumping his tail in the same rhythm. A couple of times he almost yanked the bottle clear out of my hands. I forgot about being mad at Mr. H until the foal finished the bottle and I looked up to see him standing in the stall, pipe in his mouth, watching me. Before I could say anything, he said, "Good work today, Sean. You are handling him really well." He paused for a minute. We could not leave him with his mama. She's a funny type. This is her fifth foal. She killed the first one before we had a chance to realize what was going on. We were a little quicker with the second one, but she still managed to slash the foal on the leg, and the scar she got will never fade. We got better with the last three. Why? Why doesn't she want her own kids? He shook his head. Sometimes mares are funny that way, and we don't really know why. Well, why do you let her keep having them then? Well, he said with a sigh, she's got really good bloodlines in her. He pointed to the foal. We usually get really good racing horses from her. Her third foal is training for the state steeplechase right now. He leaned against the stall door. He's really good in terms of the foals or babies that she gives us, but she doesn't know how to take care of them. We were quiet for a minute. The foal had stretched out a little and was sleeping, still half on my lap. Suddenly my stomach grumbled loudly in the silence. Mr. Hassel laughed. "Let's go get you some more grub, and then James will take you home." "What time is it?" "It's almost 8 o'clock." "No wonder I'm starved. What happened to the cop?" "Well, he was waiting at the house when I went in to clean up. I told him that we would get you home. I figured since you did all the hard work with the delivery, that you deserved to see what the little guy would really be like." "Thanks," I said, as I tried to squirm out from under the foal without waking him up. I stood up and would have fallen back down onto the foal if Mr. Hassler hadn't reached out and caught me. He grinned. "Your legs asleep?" I nodded. He put an arm around me. "Well, better start walking it off." Dinner that night was just leftovers from lunch, but I sure wasn't complaining. I think it was actually better the second time around. And this time James joined us, although it probably wouldn't have been so bad if I had been alone with Mr. Hassler. We had something in common to talk about now. While James was getting the truck to take me home, Mr. Hassler told me what to expect for tomorrow. "You'll start by learning the feeding schedule here. Then you'll need to clean the horse barn. It'll be busy for you, boy, but hopefully we won't have any more unscheduled deliveries." I turned and looked at him in the eye. "My name is Sean, Mr. Hassler. It is not boy." He returned my gaze. "My name is Dave, not Mr. Hassler." And he held out his hand. It was the first time a man had offered his hand to me as his equal. As the headlights came around the corner, he grinned. "Now that we both know who we are, I have a little homework assignment for you." Must have given him a pretty strange look, because his grin got even bigger. "Why don't you figure out what we're going to call that little guy in the stable?" "Really?" I was so excited even I could hear my voice squeak. "Really," he said gravely, "that foal has already imprinted on you for however long you decide to let him, so you might as well start calling him something that you like." James was waiting in the truck, but I wanted to know what he meant by imprinted. Mr. Hassler shook his head. "Get going home, Sean. We can talk about it tomorrow." I think James talked to me on the way home, but honestly, I don't remember a word he said. I was exhausted. I couldn't remember ever working that hard in my life. I had been on the go since the cop had picked me up at 7, and it was nearly 9:30 by the time I got home. Usually I get to take a break just by hanging out and watching TV. That night, all my body wanted to do was crawl into bed and wake up sometime next week. As tired as I was, I just had too much on my mind to go to sleep. I was going to name a foal, but first I had to find out what imprinted mean. According to the dictionary, the only definition Mr. Hassler could have been talking about was a lasting impression. Apparently the foal had the impression that I was somehow connected to him. I spent the next 45 minutes trying to come up with a great name for him, skimming parts of my favorite novels or using my textbook dictionaries, and as final inspiration, my new thesaurus. I never thought that thing would ever have a practical use in my life. It turned out that it still didn't. I didn't find a single name worth using. Finally, I told myself I would just lie down and try and brainstorm a good name. Instead, I fell asleep. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I'll pick up again tomorrow. I want you to think about and write about in the journal, in your Canvas page, what are some of the positive attributes of Sean? We've met and kind of seen him a lot on the negative side. What are some of the positive things that we could say about Sean at this point? I hope you're enjoying the story. I hope, remember, if you have questions, you can find my phone number, my school phone number on our Canvas page. There's a page in your Canvas page right above this assignment that'll tell you, has my phone number on it and stuff. So give me a call if you need anything. Send me an email. My email address is in there as well. There's other links of books that you can be reading as well. Just reach out if you have any questions or concerns whatsoever, all right? I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to reading the next part to you.